What happens when two cops stop an elderly black woman, thinking she's just another easy target, only to realize she's the mother of the state's most powerful judge? Evelyn Matthews had lived in this neighborhood for over 30 years. A quiet afternoon, a quick trip to the store, until she noticed the flashing lights in her rearview mirror. At first, it was just routine, but the moment she handed them her phone, their faces changed completely. By then, it was too late. But before we continue the story, let us know in the comment, where are you watching from? Evelyn Matthews had driven down this road 1,000 times. The same quiet street, the same well-kept lawns, the same familiar houses. She had lived in this neighborhood for over 30 years. She knew every crack in the pavement, every neighbor by name. Today was supposed to be no different. A simple grocery run, a quiet afternoon. But that changed the moment she saw the flashing blue and red lights in her rearview mirror. At first, she thought nothing of it. Maybe they were headed somewhere else. Maybe it was just a coincidence. But when the police cruiser stayed behind her, following each turn, matching her speed, she felt the first flicker of unease. Evelyn had been through this before, too many times. She knew the routine. Hands on the wheel, stay calm, no sudden movements. As she pulled to the curb, she took a deep breath. She had done nothing wrong, but she also knew that for some people that didn't matter. The officers stepped out, adjusting their belts, walking up on either side of her car. One of them tapped on the window. She rolled it down slowly. "Ma'am, do you know why we stopped you?" Evelyn met his eyes, steady and unwavering. "No, officer, I don't." But something in their smirks, in the way they stood just a little too close, told her this wasn't just about a traffic stop. This was something else. Evelyn Matthews had driven down this road 1,000 times. The same quiet street, the same well-kept lawns, the same familiar houses. She had lived in this neighborhood for over 30 years. She knew every crack in the pavement, every neighbor by name. Today was supposed to be no different. A simple grocery run, a quiet afternoon. But that changed the moment she saw the flashing blue and red lights in her rearview mirror. At first, she thought nothing of it. Maybe they were headed somewhere else. Maybe it was just a coincidence. But when the police cruiser stayed behind her, following each turn, matching her speed, she felt the first flicker of unease. Evelyn had been through this before, too many times. She knew the routine. Hands on the wheel, stay calm. No sudden movements. As she pulled to the curb, she took a deep breath. She had done nothing wrong. But she also knew that, for some people, that didn't matter. The officers stepped out, adjusting their belts, walking up on either side of her car. One of them tapped on the window. She rolled it down slowly. "Ma'am, do you know why we stopped you?" Evelyn met his eyes, steady and unwavering. "No, officer, I don't." But something in their smirks, in the way they stood just a little too close, told her this wasn't just about a traffic stop. This was something else. The officer on the driver's side leaned in slightly, resting his hand on the edge of Evelyn's window. His badge read Officer Bradley. The younger one, standing just behind him, had a sharp look in his eyes, eager, restless. Evelyn kept her hands on the steering wheel, her voice calm. "Is there a problem, officer?" Bradley smirked. "That depends. Where are you coming from?" Her grip tightened slightly, but she didn't let it show. "The grocery store." He glanced at the brown paper bags in the passenger seat, then back at her. "Mind telling me why you were driving so slow back there?" Slow? She almost laughed. She had been driving exactly at the speed limit. She knew better than to give anyone a reason to stop her. "I was following the law. The younger cop stepped closer, peering into her car like he was looking for something. "License and registration, ma'am." Evelyn exhaled through her nose. She wasn't about to argue. She reached into her purse, moving deliberately, handing over the documents without a word. Bradley took them, glancing over her ID. His smirk widened. 71 years old, huh? Evelyn didn't respond. The younger cop, Officer Daniels, stepped up. "Ma'am, do you live in this neighborhood?" She gave him a look. "For over 30 years." Daniels folded his arms. "That so?" "Because we've had reports of suspicious activity around here." Evelyn stared at him. "And you think I have something to do with that?" Bradley chuckled. "Relax, ma'am. We're just doing our job." Their job. Right. She'd seen this game before. The vague accusations, the unnecessary questions, the way they looked at her like she didn't belong, like she had to prove she had a right to be here. Daniels nodded at her back seat. "Mind if we take a look in your car?" Evelyn's stomach tightened. "Do you have a warrant?" Bradley's smirk vanished. Daniels straightened. "What's with the attitude, ma'am?" Bradley asked. "We're just asking a simple question." Evelyn met his gaze, her voice steady. "And I gave a simple answer." A flicker of irritation crossed his face. He didn't like that she wasn't intimidated. Daniels took a step back and whispered something into his radio. She had seen enough. Without another word, she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out her phone. The officers tensed immediately. "What are you doing, ma'am?" Bradley asked. She didn't answer. She tapped the screen a few times and then held the phone out to them. Bradley hesitated before taking it. He glanced at the screen. His face shifted. Daniels leaned in to look. The moment his eyes landed on the screen, his body went rigid. Evelyn could see it. The way the blood drained from their faces. Whatever confidence they had a second ago? Gone. For the first time since they stopped her, neither of them had anything to say. Bradley cleared his throat, forcing a laugh. Ma'am, maybe there's been some miscommunication here." Evelyn just watched them. Silent. Waiting. Daniel swallowed hard. He stepped back, suddenly looking around as if searching for an escape. The phone was still in Bradley's hands. He stared at the screen again, blinking like he was hoping the words would change. Finally, he muttered, "Is this, recent?" Evelyn's lips curled into the slightest smile. "It's live." Bradley looked like he had been punched in the stomach. Daniels let out a breath. "Jesus." Evelyn finally spoke. "Now, are we done here? Or do you want to keep going?" They didn't answer right away, but she saw it, the calculation happening behind their eyes. They were cornered, because on that phone was a live video call. And on the other end, her son. The state's attorney general. Daniels wiped his forehead. "Look, we didn't mean—" Evelyn took back her phone, pressing the speaker button. "Go ahead, baby. They can hear you." A deep, commanding voice came through. "Officers, do you have a warrant for this stop?" Silence. Bradley shifted. Daniels looked anywhere but at the phone. The voice continued. "If not, I suggest you let my mother go. Right now." Bradley forced a tight smile. Yes, sir. No problem." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "That's not what you were saying 2 minutes ago." Daniel stepped back quickly. "You're free to go, ma'am." Evelyn let the silence stretch for just a second longer. Let them feel it. Then finally, she started the car. And as she drove away, she didn't even bother to look in the rearview mirror. She already knew exactly what she would see. 2 officers standing on the sidewalk looking like they had just made the biggest mistake of their careers. The story didn't end there. The footage spread fast. News stations picked it up. Social media exploded. The Attorney General's office issued a statement demanding an internal investigation. Within 24 hours, both officers were placed on administrative leave. The police department called it a misunderstanding, but the public wasn't buying it. People wanted accountability. A week later, a new policy was quietly introduced. No officer could stop a driver without clear, recorded, probable cause. Evelyn never got an apology, but she didn't need one, because respect? That wasn't something she was asking for. It was something she had just taken. The two officers stood frozen on the sidewalk staring at each other, still processing what had just happened. One moment, they were in control. Two cops stopping a little old lady on a quiet street. The next, they were being ordered around by the state attorney general himself. Officer Bradley exhaled sharply, rubbing the back of his neck. We really screwed up. Daniel swallowed hard. His hands were still clenched into fists, but his confidence, gone. Think she's going to press charges? Bradley didn't answer, because they both knew it wasn't up to her anymore. Evelyn had driven away, but the damage was already done. A bystander had recorded everything. The moment Daniels first accused her, the way Bradley had smirked when he asked if she lived in the neighborhood. Every second was caught on camera, and now it was online. It started small. A few local accounts shared the clip. Then, an activist with over 500,000 followers reposted it. By nightfall, it had gone viral. The headline was brutal. Cops harass black elderly woman until she hands them the phone. By the time Bradley and Daniels clocked in the next morning, the entire department was talking about it. Someone had sent the footage to the chief. Bradley sat in the conference room, his leg bouncing under the table. Daniels sat beside him, pale, staring at the tabletop like it might swallow him whole. Across from them, Chief Reynolds. And he was furious. He leaned forward, dropping his phone onto the table. The video of their traffic stop played in silence. When it ended, Reynolds didn't speak right away. Then, in a slow, controlled voice, he said, "What the hell were you two thinking?" Neither of them answered. "You stopped an elderly woman who had done nothing wrong," he continued. "You questioned her like she was a criminal. Then, you made the mistake of getting caught. And now the entire country is watching." Daniels cleared his throat. "Chief, you what?" Reynolds cut in. "You thought she looked suspicious? You felt like she didn't belong?" He let out a bitter laugh. "Tell me, what was the probable cause?" Neither officer spoke. Reynolds nodded. "That's what I thought." He grabbed a folder from the desk and slid it across to them. "The mayor's office called this morning. They want an internal investigation. Congratulations. You're both on leave until further notice." Bradley's stomach dropped. Daniel's face turned red. "Chief, come on. This is an overreaction." "No." Reynolds' voice was sharp. "You humiliated this department. You humiliated me. And now I have to answer for your stupidity." Bradley clenched his jaw. He wanted to argue, to say something, anything that would fix this. But deep down, he knew it was too late. Meanwhile, Evelyn was at home, drinking her coffee, watching everything unfold. She hadn't planned for this. She wasn't looking for attention. She didn't want the headlines, the outrage, or the thousands of comments calling for those cops to be fired. But that's what had happened. And now, she wasn't going to stop it. Her son had called her twice that morning, checking in, making sure she was okay. He had been ready to file an official complaint, ready to go after the department, ready to make an example of them. But Evelyn had stopped him. "Let them squirm," she had said. "Let them feel it." Because the truth was, this wasn't about her. It was about all the people who had been stopped, harassed, and disrespected, just because someone thought they looked out of place. And for once, the whole world was paying attention. The backlash didn't fade. Over the next week, news outlets covered the story nonstop. Political commentators debated it on television. People wanted accountability. Then, a city council member called for a new police oversight policy. Then, the mayor's office issued a statement condemning racial profiling. Then, the police department made an announcement. All officers would undergo mandatory anti-bias training. And finally, after days of silence, the chief spoke publicly. At a press conference, standing stiffly at a podium, he announced that Bradley and Daniels were officially suspended without pay. Effective immediately, he said. This department will not tolerate misconduct, abuse of power, or racial profiling. It was the kind of statement people had heard before, the kind of promise that didn't always mean much. But for once, it was a start. And Evelyn, she just kept sipping her coffee, because she didn't need their apology. She had already won. The fallout didn't stop there. The video kept spreading, reaching millions. Celebrities, politicians, activists, everyone had something to say. The pressure on the police department grew stronger. People wanted real change, not just a temporary suspension. Within a week, a civil rights group filed a formal complaint against the department. The mayor's office announced an independent investigation. The entire city was watching. Bradley and Daniels, they couldn't escape it. Their names were everywhere. Their faces were in the headlines. Even their fellow officers started distancing themselves. Daniels deleted his social media after receiving thousands of angry messages. Bradley? He tried to lay low, but reporters found his address. His neighbors weren't too happy about the attention. At the next city council meeting, dozens of people showed up, demanding stronger action. They weren't just angry about Evelyn's stop. They were angry about all the times it had happened before, to people who didn't have a powerful son. And that's what Evelyn wanted. It was never about revenge, never about making two cops miserable. It was about making sure this didn't happen again. And now, for the first time in a long time, it felt like real change was coming. Evelyn turned off the news, leaned back in her chair, and smiled, because this time, the right people were finally listening.